Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel, your number one source for income-oriented investing. In today's video, we're going to talk about the myth, the legend, NAV erosion. So this is a pretty touchy subject for me. I'm sure you've seen me reply to many Blossom posts and comments. NAV erosion is a myth. I feel like if you're interested in these high yield funds, if you want to be an income-oriented investor, this is a very, very, very important misconception that you need to understand. So let's get into it. I will show you in this video why, or prove to you with an example, that NAV erosion is a myth slash misconception. And we'll explain why, people feel that way. I'll give you some real life examples as well. And I'll give you my thoughts and my opinions on really what you need to understand. This is a very, very important concept that you need to understand if you want to be an income investor and you like these high yield funds. It's very, very important. So let's first of all look through an example that I prepared to prove to you using grade 3 math or grade 4 math, whatever it is, that NAV erosion is a myth. I'd like to thank Moomoo, who is today's sponsor. And if you're Canadian and looking for a broker that has a lot of technology and you like to do stock analysis, look no further, because Moomoo is the first broker in Canada to introduce AI into its system. You have an AI chat bot that you could chat with to ask it questions about a certain stock or stock analysis, like earnings per share, etc., to save you time, just like you could see on your screen. And there's also a bunch of other cool features like the auto buy feature, which you could automatically schedule buying stock at a certain time, anytime you want. There's all kinds of ETF comparison tools as well. And as usual, lots and lots of bonuses for new accounts, including deposit just $100 and get $50 cash back, the easiest $50 cash back you could get. Deposit more money like you could see and you get even more cash back. 6% interest on idle funds just sitting in your account up to $10,000. 60 days commission free. They also have the earning season guess and win, where if you guess right, if the stock is going to go up or down after they post their results, you could win some cash and bonus cash as well. So make sure to sign up, try it out, everyone, to take advantage of all these great bonuses, and make sure you see the PII/Moomoo here at the top. You got to make sure you use my referral link. And on top of all these welcome bonuses, Moomoo were generous enough to provide you watchers, my watchers, an added bonus of a $30 Amazon gift card. And all you have to do to get it is a $1,000 deposit on top of all the other bonuses. So make sure to check it out. I'll also put a link to this page here, which will answer all the frequently asked questions about all these bonuses and how they work. All right, everyone. So let's say there are 5 ETFs, okay? 5 different ETFs, whatever the name is. Actually, I don't know why this got hidden here, unhide. So let's say that there's VU, there's VU1, there's VU2, there's VU3, and there's VU4. All 4 different ETFs. The exact same stocks. I use VU because I'm basically thinking of the S&P 500 here. So exact same stocks, fee, strategy, everything is the same. Everything is the same except the yield and the distributions are different. That's the only thing that's different between these 5 ETFs. Everything else is the same. Let's say one, VU, starts at $12. All the initial stock prices start at $12 per share. Okay, let's say the end, after 1 year, the stock price ends at $13.44. And let's say this one has no dividend and no distributions at all. There's no distributions at all, which means the yield is 0. VU1, same thing. The stock ends at $12. It ends exactly the same, but the annual distribution is $1.44 per share. That's the annual distribution, which it translates to a monthly distributions of 12 cents, right? 12 cents times 12 is $1.44. Then you have VU2, starts at $12, ends at $10.56. So this stock actually, the capital, the stock price, the NAV goes down after a year, but the annual distribution rate is $2.88 or 24 cents a month. And by the way, this is the annual distribution yield, right? So this is 12% yield. This is obviously 24% yield. It's just based on the annual dividend rate on the $12. You have VU3 that goes even lower, $12 to $9.12, but the distribution annual distribution rate or the dividend, annual dividend, whatever you want to call it, it's 432. Here is the monthly. VU4 goes down even more, but the dividend or distribution, annual distribution is higher. It's at 576. So all of them have the same start price. The end price after 1 year, or the capital or the stock price, is all different. And as we go further, it goes lower and lower. But as we go further, the yield or the distribution rate is higher and higher. I'm just simulating that. So basically for VU1, the stock price, right? The stock price or the NAV change, stock chart, you're up 12%. This one, nothing, remain the same. This one down 12%. Minus 24%. On this one, minus 36%. But if we calculate the value of your investment with dividends reinvested, what is it? Well, it's actually the same for all of them, right? It's actually all the same for all of them, because this one would be $12. You made a $1.44 gain, capital gain. There's no dividends. So you're at $13.44. This one, the capital stayed the same, but you got $1.44 per share in dividend that year, 12 cents a month, which means $12 plus $1.44, right? The distribution is part of the net asset value. It's being given out to you in cash, 12 cents a month of it. If you're reinvesting all of that, you would end up with $13.44, 12 plus 144 that you reinvested, 1056 plus 288, 912. That's your capital. The capital is lower, but the distributions have been higher. The yield have been higher. So if you're reinvesting that, essentially, my point is that VU1, VU2, VU3, VU4, even though they will have completely different stock charts, right? VU, you'll see plus 12% stock chart. Right? You'll see plus 12%. VU1, you'll see a dead person. You'll see a flatline stock chart. It didn't go anywhere. VU2, you'll see a negative 12%. VU3, minus 24%. VU4, minus 36%. The stock charts will look completely different. But the total return after 1 year is exactly the same for all 5 funds. It's 12%. If you're reinvesting the distributions, you're going to have a 12% total return after 1 year. If you put $10,000 in this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one, turn the drip on, after a year, your capital will be up 12%. Your investment is going to be up 12%, right? It's going to look exactly the same. So why exactly does VU2, but the stock charts are going to look different, which means VU2, even more so VU3, and even more so VU4 will typically get the tag NAV erosion, right? So here's the $1 million question, and here's a conclusion. And then we'll look at some other points, some tips, and some examples. And we'll even see what AI has to say about NAV erosion. If all 5 ETFs have the same exact total return after 1 year, right? $10,000 investment would become $11,200 investment, right? 12 plus 12%. Even if the stock charts look completely different, how can VU2, 3, and 4 get the tag NAV erosion, but VU and VU1 do not? It makes no sense. NAV erosion is a myth, right? So essentially, that is what happens, when the stock chart goes down over time, or the NAV goes down over time, people say NAV erosion. Erosion, the problem I have is the word erosion, because that has a connotation around it that it's a loss. Erosion means it's disappearing. You're losing it. It's gone. But if you remember these important points, and these are super, super important, everyone, especially if you want to be an income investor, you need to understand this. All right, you need to understand this. Very important to remember, everyone. Distributions on these ETFs, distributions are part of the NAV that are being given out to you as an investor. So how can it be erosion if you're getting it in cash? It absolutely makes no sense. So tip number 1, everyone, always look at the total returns to evaluate funds, not NAVs, not the stock price. Okay. Tip number 2, very important. A lot of people have trouble thinking about this and the way they think about this. If your goal as an investor is to preserve your capital over time, but spend or live off of the income. So you're thinking like you're trying to build a PII portfolio that kind of, you're trying to mimic an annuity or a GIC, right? I want to put this much. I want that, whatever it is, 1 million, 100,000. I want that to be more or less stable. I want the million to be there in 5 years. I want the million to be still 1 million in 5 years or whatever it is, but I want to spend all the income. You need to reinvest the appropriate percentage amount or choose funds that have an appropriate distribution level, distribution policy. What do I mean by that? Well, if you really, really like something like VU2, which, I chose VU and 12% because I'm kind of thinking of the S&P 500 here, where, let's just say for argument's sake, the average long-term average annual return of all these ETFs, I'm simulating it's 12%, right? In the last 10 years, it's actually higher than that. The S&P is returning, I think, about 14% on average a year. But if you go back 100 years, it's like 10 to 12 or something like that. Let's just say it's 12. Okay, so if you own VU, the problem is you're going to have to sell shares. There's no income. You have to sell shares. If your objective is that your capital never wants to, that you want your capital to be stable and you want to be okay spending all the money and your capital remains more or less intact, VU1 is the ETF that is best designed for you, right? Because as you could see here, basically the dividend yield is essentially the same or similar to the return of the fund. 12%, so if that's the case, if the yield is going to be similar to the return, your stock price or your capital is going to remain the same or close throughout the years. But you could still live off of, quotes here, I'm doing quotes here, live off of VU2. You're getting 24% yield, but the return, if the estimate of the annual return per year is 12, well, the appropriate amount to reinvest is half. Right, is 50%. It's 12% of that 24%. You could still do it with VU3. You could still live off of VU3, but you're gonna have to reinvest 2/3 of the income. VU4, 3/4 of the income. It's just math. It's just math. So this really, it depends on your goal as an investor, how much work you want to put in. But if you want to put zero work, obviously VU1 is going to be the best for you. But now the question is, why would someone choose VU2 or VU3 or VU4 over VU1? It's a very good question, right? Before we look at that question, I asked Grok, I asked AI, and it gave me a bunch of good stuff. And look what I found here. Key considerations for investor. Misconceptions. This is perfectly said. NAV erosion is often misunderstood as a loss. That's spot on. But as noted in a 2025, whatever, it's a transfer of value from the fund to the investor via distributions. Exactly what I tried to show you with those examples. It's not NAV erosion because it's not disappearing, it's not being a loss. It's being given out to you as an investor in cash. How could it be erosion? Makes no sense. Total return, NAV movement or NAV plus distributions, that's total return, is a better measure of performance. You have to include the distributions. Mitigation strategies. Investors can mitigate NAV erosion, quotes, by reinvesting distributions. Selecting funds with lower ROC, I would replace ROC with lower distributions, right? So, and it goes on to say that whatever, investors should evaluate total return and consider reinvestment strategies to balance income needs with capital preservation, especially in funds with higher ROC, or I would say high distributions or aggressive distributions policies. All right, so let's go back to the question now, everyone. Let's go back to a couple of questions that I think I know I'm going to get. Why would somebody choose this one, VU2, VU3, over 4, over VU1? Well, it's because the more income that comes out, the more you go towards the higher yielding one, the more flexibility you have, because you're getting more distribution, you're getting more cash, so you have more flexibility. So for example, me personally, this is just me, I would like VU2. I think VU2, even VU3, I would consider, or I would like more than VU1, but that's just me personally. Again, it all comes down to your objectives. If you have VU2 and you have 24% yield, some investors will like that, because what some investors do is they take that high yield and maybe they invested in something else that month, right? You have a lot of high yield investors that have a bunch of them, and what they'll do is, you know, let's say the S&P is doing really well, they'll grab this yield and they see something else in their portfolio they want to average down, or they see more of an opportunity. Well, they'll take, because they have more flexibility, they got more distribution and more income that month, they have the flexibility to do so, right? So some people like getting more income and want to decide. I would fall under the category, give me the more income, let me decide what to do with the income. Whether it's, and this is where you have to manage your own distributions, and distribution management comes in. If you want to do the least amount of work, it would be VU1. But if you want more income, and you understand that it comes out of the NAV, so the total return is the same anyway for all of these, and you want the flexibility to invest it in something else that month, well, VU2 or VU3 or VU4 gives you more of that flexibility, right? So VU3, maybe you'll reinvest a third of it back in VU3, maybe you'll reinvest a third of it in a growth S&P 500, and maybe you'll reinvest a third of it into some other stock that's down that month, right? You get more flexibility to do what you want. But if that's not part of your objective as an investor, you're lazy, you just, not saying you're lazy, but you just don't want to do that. You just want something to live off of, and you don't want to babysit or decide, well, VU1 is probably the best one for you, right? In this situation. Another question I'll get, will VU2 or 3 or 4 eventually go to zero? Right, because they're giving out so much of that NAV out in distribution, will it go to zero? You'll see VU4 obviously will have a more declining stock price. The answer is only if whatever is inside the ETF goes to zero. So in this case, let's just say the S&P 500, right? And but Adrian, they're giving out so much, eventually it'll go to zero, right? They could just do a reverse split. They could just do a reverse split to prop up the stock price again. And now I know what you're going to say, well, that's a bad thing. Will I lose money? A reverse split, just like a stock split, actually has no impact on your investments. And it's an artificial thing that they do to either increase or lower the stock price that has no impact on the value of your investment. Watch my stock split, reverse split video if you want to see my opinion on that. But I would say that it won't go to zero. Why would the fund manager of VU4 and VU3 make it go to zero and now we're not getting any more fees anymore, guys? Are you crazy? I mean, they're not going to do that. So they could just reverse split. So no, as long as the S&P does not go to zero, VU3 and VU4 should not go to zero. Okay. So does NAV erosion, I would say capital erosion is a better way to say it. Does investment in erosion actually exist? I would say yes, it does. So a few examples here. I would say that something like TLT has NAV erosion because the total return is negative, right? In this period of time, 5 years, the average annual, if you put $10,000 or whatever amount of money in TLT 5 years ago, on average, your investment would be down 9.18% a year. Cumulatively, you would be down after 5 years. If you put whatever amount of money in TLT, you would be down 38.22%. I think that if you really, the erosion means loss. NAV erosion, capital erosion, investment erosion, it's if you have a negative total return. If the total return is positive over the period of time, of course, if you're just looking at 1 year, 6 months, and you see negative, well, you can't really say. I'm saying over the long term, right? Over a 1, 2, 3 year plus period. For example, if a new S&P 500 ETF comes out and after 1 week, the S&P goes down 10%, it's minus 10% return. You can't exactly say, well, is it NAV erosion? Yeah, I guess you could say it's a loss, but you have to look at things from a long-term perspective. So in my opinion, this is a good example of something that actually has erosion. Your investment, your money, your capital is eroding for the last 5 years and even 10 years. 10 years. If you put $100,000, X amount of money in TLT 10 years ago, you would be down 3.15%. Now that's NAV erosion. That's capital erosion. It's a loss. It's your investment is going down, right? But something like a YMAX that will always get a NAV erosion tag. You look at the stock price, minus 37%. That's NAV erosion, Adrian. It's NAV erosion. But now if we look at the total returns, the long-term returns on, I mean, this fund has not been out for 10 years or whatever, but you know, a little over a year. You have since inception cumulative and inception annualized, it's positive. So this, my friends, does not have any NAV erosion because your money, your investment would have increased over time. So why it makes no sense. This is why, you know, tip number 1 is always look at the total returns for the ultimate truth. So something like a YMAX will always get a NAV erosion label, but something like a JEPI will never get it, right? So JEPI, you know, 7 or 8% yield. It's designed, it's a covered call ETF. By far the most popular, I think, and biggest covered call ETF in the US, okay? So if you look at the stock price since inception, it's been out since COVID, actually. They launched it right after COVID since 2020. So it's over 5 years that it's out. And hey, the stock price is up 13%, plus there's a nice yield. This has no NAV erosion. YMAX has NAV erosion. Oh yeah? Why don't we do JEPI versus YMAX, a total return comparison? Why don't we do that? YMAX, since inception, right? You always have to use the same start date when you compare two ETFs. And this tool, by the way, which is a great tool, the Dividend channel tool, guys, the ultimate truth. You could compare two ETFs with dividends reinvested and with dividends not reinvested. YMAX is destroying or completely outperforming JEPI, which means if you would have put 10,000 in each of these at the exact same date, January 17, 2024, your 10,000 will be worth 11,765 with JEPI and 13,797 with YMAX if you would have just put the drip on. If you would have put 10,000 in each of these ETFs, put the drip on, right, automatic reinvestment, this would be your return. Even if you don't put the drip on and spend all the money, we're still counting the distributions, but you're not reinvesting them. It's simulating if you're not reinvesting them into the fund, but it's still counting them as part of the return. YMAX still outperforms JEPI. Okay? So how is it possible that YMAX gets the term NAV erosion, but JEPI does not? It makes no sense. And I could go on and show you more examples, right? XDTE, right? NAV erosion, it's down 16%, everyone. It's terrible. Oh, yeah? And XDTE versus JEPI. Why is XDTE outperforming JEPI if it has NAV erosion and JEPI has not? You see what I mean? It absolutely makes no sense. So the reason why this kind of upsets me when I see NAV erosion is that it could be dissuading investors from potentially investing in good investments that have superior total returns over another investment just because you read that it has NAV erosion. So it's important to always look at the total returns. That's the ultimate truth, everyone. Okay? Who are the people that typically claim NAV erosion? Well, from what I've noticed and realized, it's people who are not in a high yield income strategy. They have no experience. They don't have much knowledge on how these funds work, where the distributions come from, that the distributions are part of the NAV. That's number one. Two, they simply cannot do math, like I showed you. Or 3, people who understand that it's a misconception and a myth, but they create content, clickbait content, videos for views and attention. That's my personal opinion. Okay, so I would highly recommend you watch my latest PII testimonial, where it's a very smart guy, Tim. He went all in on PII. He did a lot of studying, a lot of research, and we discussed NAV erosion in detail at the beginning of part 2. It's very interesting. Also, I could share with you my experience sharing this with fund managers off camera. I'll be honest with you, they're very nice when they say this, but you know, we kind of laugh about this whole NAV erosion thing. But basically what they told me, it's just a matter of education. That's the nicest way they put it. It's a matter of education. It's just a matter of knowledge. And right, we got to get the education out there, right? So final thoughts, everyone. In conclusion, everyone, in summary, these are the points you should remember, okay? Erosion, the term erosion is not correct at all. It signifies a loss. It's gone, it disappears. It's not the case. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a myth, because distributions are part of the NAV. It's not eroding. It's being given out to you, the investor, as cash for you to decide what to do with. Point number 2. Look at the total returns to evaluate ETFs, not share prices. It's the ultimate truth. Use the Dividend channel. There's a Dividend channel Canada, the Dividend channel US. There's plenty of other places where you could compare total returns. If the total return, well, the trend is there's a year, 2 years, or 3 years, and the total return is positive, there is no NAV erosion. There is no loss of investment. Okay, maybe you could say the investment sucks versus this, the total return is underperformed versus that. That's fine, but don't say NAV erosion. Okay, number 3 important point comes really down, if you're going to be an income investor, you have to master the management of your distributions. Okay, so this is all decision taken by you personally, the investor, based on your goals and your style. You want to be the ultimate lazy income investor. You don't want to decide. You're going to have to choose a fund that gives an appropriate distribution level, right? So if it's an S&P 500 income ETF, well, something that gives a yield that's similar to the total return or the average annual return of the S&P makes sense. That's why that magical range in Canada, especially, the magical range is typically between 12 and 15%. A little bit higher, a little bit lower. It depends on many things, right? These are not annuities. Covered call ETFs are not annuities or GICs. The capital will fluctuate. It's up to you to manage your distributions properly, understand what you're really investing in, the distribution policy of the fund. If you want to be lazy, well then, if you don't want to do any work, choose the appropriate funds. And your if you want to be lazy, and your goal is that your capital, your investment, you want that million or 100,000 to be a million or 100,000 after 5-10 years, choose appropriate funds or manage your distributions properly. Last point, claiming NAV erosion on a high yield fund with a high distribution and a positive total return, to me, it's just like looking at stock charts. It's pointless. You're judging a book by its cover. I've proven this with JEPI versus YMAX, JEPI versus XDTE. There's so many more examples, right? And last point, if anyone still claims NAV erosion on a fund with a positive total return, ask them this very simple question. Where is the NAV eroding to? They won't be able to answer. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Take care, everyone, and see you next time.